Hey, what up, it's me, your boy Nick. So, over the weekend, dozens of conventions happened around the country, from Denver Fan Expo, Anthrocon, and Anime Expo, being three to name a few. And as cons do, a lot of notable events happened that sparked controversy and conversation for their respective groups, from Anime Expo withholding food from the vendors and eating it in front of them, to Denver Fan Expo literally making me and my partner walk a quarter mile with a 150-pound tote. I'm not salty, I'm just a little tired. But either way, we're going to do an overview of some events that happened at Anthrocon 2022, so without further ado, let's get into it. The brief, short, and good news is that, as always, the event was announced on the local news, as Anthrocon is known for its immense economic value that it brings to Pittsburgh over the weekend, and runs nearly 10,000 furries to town, with upwards of $10 million in economic value over the weekend. And this isn't even counting all the donations that were able to be had, which is absolutely wonderful to always hear. But furries in general were depicted in a very positive light, where over the years people are more and more enthusiastic about the inevitable arrival, and the public reception has become so much more welcoming to the convention.
When Anthrocon comes back, it means we're not just putting folks in hotel rooms, we're bringing all the joy that Anthrocon brings to the city.
With thousands of furries, colorful, creative, passionate people who share a love of art and fiction about anthropomorphized animals. For us so-called non-furs, there will be plenty of neat stuff to check out too, so we're really excited for this one.
But the con itself did have a number of issues that the con intends to address that left a lot of attendees honestly worried for their safety. Of which a person even dressed in riot gear antagonized several meetup groups and made numerous people feel threatened and unsafe by anything from hurling slurs and just being an awful person. This individual was eventually removed by security without incident and was hopefully assumed that Anthrocon has spread their information with others to ensure that this individual doesn't return, and Friday they put out a formal statement on the matter, thanking the community for helping them find the individual. This, however, was seen in stark contrast to the claims that dozens of police were used to clear out the convention center spaces sooner than just gentle announcements from other furries. Some claim that they were even carrying zip ties in hand, hands on their holsters, and generally scaring the crap out of everyone, fearing that they'd done something wrong. Some convention goers were even confronted by the police simply for wandering the convention space. Anthrocon eventually put out a statement on this as well on July 3rd. We are aware of reports involving our law enforcement partners using unnecessary aggression when clearing the con space. We're truly sorry that happened. There is no excuse, as they were instructed to exercise courtesy within our group. We deeply regret that this was not the case. We will be revisiting our relationship with our partners immediately to ensure that this will never happen again. This behavior has no place at AC. We are as angry as you and will work to improve our security practices and policies with outside partners. This is our guarantee. They then later followed up in an additional statement made on July 14th that they do intend to revise and take down eventually, but for now this is what they have to say. We want to address the aggressive behavior of our venue's police detail and the issues that were caused over the course of the weekend, culminating in an aggressive exit on Sunday. The staffing challenges of returning from the pandemic not only affected our own team, but our own venue's private security resources. As a result, municipal police resources were brought in by the venue to supplement the security effort. As we've seen and heard, it caused more problems than it solved, and for that we are truly sorry. We will not have the police department responsible return to our convention. Due to our contractual obligations, we are still required to have a law enforcement present at the convention, and we'll be looking to bring a hand-selected outfit of law enforcement that we trust and have good standing with our community. These will be from the Allegheny County Sheriff's Office, who we have worked with for over 15 years and have had stellar reputation within our group. They further explain why there is a necessity to have law enforcement at the convention for those who are unaware. Given the size our event is nearly 10,000 people and various events we host, our insurance and venue partners require us to maintain a minimum police presence in the convention space and public events like the block party. This is something we must do from safety, deterrence, and contract obligation perspective. Other large conventions, both furry and other, are also required to have police presence. Doesn't Anthrocon have its own safety security team that can do this job? Anthrocon's safety team is primarily responsible for customer service, crowd control, roaming patrols, and enforcing our standards of conduct while at the convention. This year's team was newly formed and working with fewer hours, and we will be working on actively recruiting and training our staff to cover more areas so we reduce our reliance on external help. As stated above, there are still contractual obligations that we must fulfill as an organization in order to hold the event, which includes having law enforcement officers. We are doing our best to balance the needs of our attendees with those of our obligations. We know that trust between attendees groups at Anthrocon and law enforcement has been strained, particularly with our BIPOC LGBT community. And we want to find a balance between the comfort of our attendees with our obligations. We're also actively seeking to learn more about attendee concerns and how we can take experiences from marginalized communities into consideration as we plan for future events. There are bridges to be repaired between AnthroCon and the trust of our attendees, and we intend to work hard to repair them. We promise to do right by you and hope you'll give us the opportunity to do so at AnthroCon 2023. If you have any feedback, please reach out to us here. I do actually really appreciate this statement. It does fully encapsulate a lot of questions that a lot of people had. Why were there police there? Why weren't there security there? And it kind of reinforces the idea that a lot of it was staffing concerns, because generally speaking, the entire fandom knows the strain and stress that comes with police. It very obviously had to do with contracts and reaching minimum staff requirements. I understand that there are going to be people who this is not at all remedying the situation. That's understandable. Either way, the con still did go by fairly without incident. They even clarified in the beginning that they made $41,000 for charity, and overall, aside from any events we even list in this video, the event went splendidly. And I am very proud that they are trying to take those steps to keep the community informed on why they make those decisions, because I think a lot of us kind of fall in the dark of like, this makes no sense to me, a bystander, someone who has not planned a convention before. Because the more that conventions can kind of let us into their processes on how they select people like con chairs, people who actually run the event, how they actually go about those decision-making processes, and while yes, that does open them up to a lot of unwarranted scrutiny, it does help build more trust with the community. And overall, I think this statement is sufficient. But these were actually not the events that got furry drama trending on Twitter. That goes completely to a single Twitter post of someone showing off a horse fursuit with, at minimum, F-size boobs and huge hips running around the con space. The suitor goes by Fiona Murray on Twitter, and at the time of writing has gained several hundred to several thousand followers from the exposure. This single horse fursuit sparked a wave of controversy and conversation, and eventually the post was found by non-furries who proceeded to be incredibly mean and judgmental towards the suit, bordering on all-out harassment. As for reactions within the fandom, they were fairly mixed. The conversation basically revolving around, does this type of fursuit A, belong in public in view of potential minors, and B, what qualifies as an over-sexualized fursuit?
Should suits that are that busty be allowed in public at a con? And my opinion is, well, no. Honestly, no. I'm not saying fursuits with just any bust at all shouldn't be allowed. Like, for example, here's this suit. And this suit. And I honestly believe that both these suits are completely acceptable and should be allowed at conventions, in public, wherever. Because, let's face it, anatomy is natural, and, you know, female furries or female identifying furries sometimes have breasts, and that's okay. They should be allowed in public at cons. And I know this was a big Twitter argument. Believe me, we're going to be talking about more than just the booby or not booby argument, but like fursuits that have normal size or like within the possibility of normal size chests, that's acceptable. But when you get to hyper like this, that to me is like you are focusing on a element of the body and you are sexualizing it and you are fetishizing it. And once you bring that into public, that can make various con goers and other people feel very uncomfortable. So that's, to me, when you push the boundary and you go, hey, that's too much, that shouldn't be allowed at a con. And I know there's multiple suits that have hyper chests like that, and honestly, that's totally cool. I've nothing against it, but keep it in the bedroom and at home. That's my opinion on it.
In the past, big busted fursuiters were removed from the con floor and sparked waves of controversy where muscular suits were able to stay. And even in there lies the conversation on whether that has implications of being unfair. My opinion, generally speaking, I don't know how to feel on this particular topic. I do understand that many see this as sexually promiscuous, some even pointing to the skimpy bathing suit as being more explicit than if the suit had no clothes on at all. We do see this often though, with conventions often asking suits that have underwear to keep it in the After Dark section because of those implications that just the underwear give it. But one comment I continuously see is that conventions do cater to children in some way. Not only do I feel like this is generally misguided, I feel like it's fairly disingenuous. In the same manner that saying someone has a kid audience is just used to discredit them in some manner or justify criticism toward them, I think there is an argument, yes. Children may attend, but I don't in any capacity feel like its primary target is children in any way. Cons usually take a huge monetary hit because of insurance and liability costs. The fact that AnthroCon and other cons are able to have all ages events is because they are actively choosing to take that monetary hit and that liability. And keep in mind, this isn't my opinion on whether the suit is NSFW or not, but even family-friendly events aren't necessarily targeted at children, even though they can go there, if that makes sense. Hey, this is post-editing Nick. I thought about it a little bit more because I wanted to actually give you guys like some kind of like thought instead of just being like, I don't know. Like, let me just not come up with an opinion because I should have an opinion on this at least. So I thought about it for a while and I think fursuits need a dress code. Thought about this for a while, and you're probably having the same kind of expression that I thought, because I know how people are going to react when I say that, is, why should fursuits have a fucking dress code? That's stupid. They don't exist. Well, let me clarify. When you talk about being in fursuit, you talk about being in the magic, right? You are now part of that kind of world, and the thing about it is outfits definitely have connotations to them. There's a reason why you are allowed to wear a bikini, generally speaking, at the beach, but you're not necessarily allowed to wear lingerie. It has completely different connotations, even though it technically covers the same amount of area. Even though a fursuit, technically, you are completely covered head to toe, having skimpy bikinis and having underwear are generally considered to be risque because of the associations that come with them. It's very similar to the pup mask talk that we had a few weeks ago, where I did talk on whether pup masks can only be after dark, or are there situations in which they can be safe for work and the public can kind of treat it as such, which is a gray area, I will 100% admit. I did receive a few upset reactions of people who basically said, there is no reason that I should have to mask my sexuality for the comfort of others, which I thought was a very self-important kind of statement, but they meant it with full sincerity. My thought is this: if you are making the deliberate choice to make others uncomfortable and to not be open to criticism because you feel like that is an expression of your sexuality, then sure, good for you. But the thing about it that I realized when I was thinking about this is I think that the fandom actually conflates sex expression and sexuality quite often. A lot of people say that the fandom is very openly sex positive, which is 100% great. But I think that we're starting to conflate the idea of sex expression with sexuality. There is a very large difference between being proud that you're a very kinky person and are invested in the LGBT community in that sort of realm versus being proud that you're asexual. I feel like those are two very different realms of thought and two very different realms of expression that we are starting to conflate under the guise of saying that we are proud of sexuality. One side being how you express your attraction to others versus sex positivity in that realm, which I do believe is an 18+ space. I think it is fair to say that you should put at least the comfort of children in consideration. And Fiona Murray did do this. She did take a lot of the concerns to heart, and actually by the end of the convention did adorn a teal dress, and I believe that she is planning on doing that moving forward when not in 18+ spaces. And so that is a very important aside to the situation, but otherwise back to past Nick. I did want to reach out to Fiona Murray before scripting, and she wanted to give some of her side. And so she said the following: I understand some concerns that the suit isn't appropriate around kids. I don't like interacting with kids, and I try to be respectful when they're near. However, they're pretty much at every con these days and unavoidable. Furry conventions are the only place for me to wear the suit, which is an expression of my ideal form and helps me with my dysphoria. And if you bring your kid to a furry convention, you have to at least be aware of the far worse sights that can be seen there. I'm not your kid's mom. By Sunday, of course, I put on something more modest, like a teal dress, because I did take some of the concerns to heart. I was wearing the American flag bikini at first because of 4th of July, but even if my suit wasn't completely naked, there's no genitals on it. It is not a mersuit. But in the end, furries flocked to them with a wave of support, clamored at the conversation whether this was NSFW or not, and if it belonged on OpenCon floor. But as internet drama goes, there can't simply just be a disagreement. It has to in some way turn into an allegation. Fiona Murray has multiple NSFW accounts, and despite their fursuit not being used for sexual purposes, they do have a Twitter where they do post explicit artwork of their fursona with exceedingly exaggerated proportions and being overly endowed in every aspect. The controversy surrounding Fiona's character has a, let's go with really large male horse part down there that adorn their character, accompanying the huge jambalayas and their thickest of thighs. I'm going to be very blatant and say this very clearly. I don't believe Fiona is a zoo. This allegation is a clear representation of how willing people are to throw around very serious allegations with very little evidence. I think people go out of their way to actively look for things that they think are sketch or upsetting or make them uncomfortable and try to tie that to an allegation, and I heavily disavow that mentality. If someone is a bad person, of course, call it out, but just don't try to formulate a reason to make someone a bad person. But this sparked several larger creators to even chime in with their thoughts on the matter. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, their character is a representation of themselves. And you can have an opinion on whether something like that makes you uncomfortable, but making the decision to turn that discomfort into a potentially life-ruining allegation when they aren't hurting anyone is willfully malicious. I don't think they're a threat to animals. I don't think they're a threat to kids. I think that they're just someone out there living their best life in a figure that accurately represents themselves in ways that the real world really can't. As for the conversation of is it okay around kids, speaking for myself and only myself, I feel like if I was a child or a 13-year-old or somewhere in between, I feel like at best I'd probably just think it was funny. And at worst, I would think it was cringe. This is the same conversation we continue to have about kink at Pride. Despite the fact that sex and sexuality being an inherent part of the LGBT community, the idea that making it a sanitized space inherently removes a significant and integral part of the community. But at the same time, how do we tackle this and express pride to the next generation safely? This is the same debate that got kids banned from drag shows because they were seen as inherently predatory and villainized the drag community as groomers. Is that the similar path that we are going to take in this fandom? Should more cons be only 18 plus or at least have 18 plus sections? Is this a sexualized suit if a hyper-muscular suit is allowed? Is it sexualized because of the skimpy clothing sooner than lack thereof? How are we having conversations like this when on the same weekend, Anime Expo women consistently dressed in skimpy cosplay in booths openly had pictures of women with nipples without having to censor or curate who goes in and out of their booth? All I know is that people spreading the narrative that they are willfully trying to be sexual towards kids or that they're a zoo without significant groundbreaking evidence, I'll kick you in the fucking teeth because I'm tired. The one thing I do want to add to the questions I just asked is when it came to anime women or people who are wearing cosplay in any capacity, one thing that I find interesting is when someone is wearing a very skimpy cosplay, it usually goes over fine if they are generally skinnier or just very lightly curvy. But the second someone has, like they naturally have a lot of curves to them and they're still wearing the same amount of clothing, people treat it like it's much more scandalous. That is just something that I wanted to say because I feel like there's a weird climate around people who are naturally curvaceous, just doing the same thing that skinnier, lightly curvy people are able to do, but are somehow seen as much more sexual because they have inherent natural curves. I think that's also adding to the conversation here. One issue that I also consistently see is when events like this happen at conventions that made the con bad, something like that. A lot of people will take that and try to apply it to the entire con and try and say that the entire con was a bust. The entire con was bad this year. The con had everything bad happen to it. No, AnthroCon was an incredible experience to a lot of people. Aside from the hiccups that did happen, everything ran very smoothly. And I do hope that people are able to have the critical thinking capacity to understand that negative things can happen, but a con that has over 10,000 people that runs over 4th of July weekend is bound to have at least some hiccups. And while they're not necessarily the greatest of events to happen, we have to be very respectful of the people who do run it. They are doing their best. I 100% guarantee you in every capacity, they are putting themselves out in ways that we could only imagine. Please don't take isolated events that do happen at conventions to try to either paint all cons bad or this con as I'm never going to AnthroCon again. Cons are never going to be 100% perfect because it is 10,000 individuals doing individual shit. Please, for the love of God, don't try to say, oh, we don't need AnthroCon anymore, because that's just kind of silly. But overall, I want to know your guys' thoughts. If you want to support me and what I do, feel free to check out my Patreon. I do tons of cute little stuff over there. Or you can look out and see if I have any extra stuff from cons that I'm trying to just sell. Denver Fan Expo was my first con. I learned a lot. Comic-Cons aren't the place for furries. You know, I knew that going into it. I needed the confirmation and I definitely got it. And I have all kinds of stuff going on. But either way, thank you for watching. I'm sorry this video came out a little bit late. It was my birthday over the weekend and here we are. But I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and yeah, I'll catch you later. Ciao.